Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be answering one of the questions that was left in the comments of I think not my latest video, but the video before that, asking what small businesses and people who are trying to get into the cybersecurity field might want to know, about policies or about how things in, our sector work. Today I'm going to start with one question. What principles are associated with network structure and with firewall implementation? The short version of this is going to basically be network structure defines trust zones and traffic pathways, and the firewall enforces those pathways with rules, visibility, and basically ongoing control. So our first slide here is going to be our first principle, which is that design is driven by business and risk needs. The network and firewall are not built randomly. They are built to reflect what the organization must protect as a part of compliance, or just, because they know certain things need to be a certain way. They're built to also make sure that services are available and that the risks associated with getting those services or protecting that information are within the acceptable range. So the why essentially determines the structure and the firewall policy. Now we'll go to this slide right here. This slide explains why structure matters. A flat network creates three essential core problems: uncontrolled lateral movement, an expanded blast radius, and no internal boundaries for enforcement or monitoring. So one compromise can essentially spread everywhere in the system, and you have no way to apply a meaningful policy if you are on a flat network. Now, we're going to talk about our first major network structure principle, which is segmentation. Basically, what we do is we take the network and we divide it into zones based on trust and function. So like our internet is considered the most unsecure of the network. And then, we have a DMZ, an internal network, a server network, and management networks. I'll maybe do some videos if someone puts some comments in the description about going over the specifics of those kinds of segmentation or those kind of networks if you want some more information on that. But ultimately, we're here to talk about segmentation, which segmentation just creates boundaries where basically we have rules or policies that monitor and force traffic to go a certain way based on what's going on. To continue here, the second network structure principle, which is the least privilege for network access. Systems should basically only communicate with what they explicitly need. For example, user devices should not have direct access to databases, because what if that account gets compromised? Well, then now the database is compromised. We can enforce this through a variety of things, but mainly we're going to force this structure using VLANs, routing controls, ACLs, and some inner zone firewall rules. If you want some information on how the VLANs work or how ACLs work or how to even apply an inner zone firewall rule, you can put that in the comment below as well. Basically, we do all of this to create results that lead to fewer attack paths and a smaller attack surface. And when we're talking about an attack surface, we mean that ultimately every system has its own weaknesses and compromisable issues. What we try to do as technology professionals and as cybersecurity professionals is reduce that attack surface so that even when things do get in, we have a certain amount of control as to how we can stop those things from progressing to a certain point and compromising the data. Now we're going to talk about a third network structure principle, which is called layered defenses or defense in depth. We don't rely on one control in cybersecurity, nor do we in IT. We add overlapping controls so that if one failure, occurs, there's something that will catch that next threat. And when we're doing this, we also identify trust boundaries, the points where changes like the internet edge or partner links, cloud edges, and remote access entry points are. We try to identify where we start and the rest of the system begins. Those are where the enforcements and the logging processes are going to be the strongest, or should be at their strongest. If you want to take a minute to look at this here, or post, if you have a question now, go ahead and post it. All right. What we'll get into is this next one. Sorry if it's a little bit fuzzy. I did my best to clear it up as much as possible, but we're going to switch to the firewall implementation principles. A good design is basically only as good as it's enforced. The firewall is the enforcement engine that turns those architectural principles that we kind of just talked about into real controlled traffic. It is the point of control that stops unauthorized things and protects our sensitive zones. And you can kind of see here how we've laid all this out and shown how it kind of interacts together. Our first firewall implementation rule, this is my personal default, but also business best practice: deny by default, permit by exception. Go through and make sure that by default every port is denied, and then only go through and say, hey, this is what I have and this is what it needs to connect to and this is the port it uses, and open up those ports only. Everything you leave open is just another way for someone to get in, especially if you've opened up something and went, oh, I forgot to monitor it, things like that happen. But the rules, when you make them, have to be specific, including the source and destination, the port or service, but ideally the application identity as well. The warning here that you see below is very important. Any-to-any rules represent an unmanaged risk and should always be treated as high priority exceptions. Our second firewall implementation principle is visibility through logging and monitoring. A firewall that doesn't log is a blind control. It's a useless control in my mind. Logging keys allow and deny events and then send it to a central scene, and then they are able to culminate the alerts on these anomalies. Also, enforcing outbound control with egress filtering controls the outbound traffic and helps prevent data exfiltration. This can also help with blocking malware command and control communications. Having these here prevent a good deal of what people both in the SMB field and just technicians fighting these issues have to deal with. Do this, it'll save you a lot of trouble. Our third firewall implementation principle, which is about the managing the rule lifecycle. As you can see, we have 3 distinct steps here. Over time, basically rules accumulate and create hidden exposures. Each rule basically should be documented. When you make a rule, you should create a document that specifies, hey, this is what the rule is for, this is what it does, and this is what it's connected to. And everything should have a justification and also be reviewed regularly and brought to either the board, your manager, or whoever it is that asked you to put these security implementations in place. We need to treat firewall rules like code. Maintain, refactor them, make sure that there isn't an update that you forgot to do a couple days ago. These things are very important in treating, these controls the way that they should be, which is ideally as defenses to stop attacks, helps people extraordinarily. Now, this diagram ties it all together. Network structures create defensible zones and controlled pathways. Firewalls enforce those pathways using default, deny, specific rules, and continuous monitoring. If either piece is weak, security becomes inconsistent and ultimately unreliable. You can see kind of a map here of what things should kind of look like and all of these different interactions that take place that you might not be necessarily thinking of in the moment, but you should be. Take a moment to kind of review what's going on, and if you have any questions or you want something that needs to be talked about specifically, again, comment it below. Now, we're going to talk about our final, principle, which ultimately is pretty simple. Networks are a living system. Networks change, businesses change, and ultimately threats change. We now have AI coming into the mix when it comes to cyber hacking and even cybersecurity defense. So the blueprint you use, ultimately the segmentation and the policies that you put in place must be actively maintained as an organization evolves. Always be reconsidering these. And personally, I think boards should make more of an effort to make cybersecurity something that they put on their docket at least once per quarter, at least every other quarter. Because this stuff changes so fast and the technology is just, it's there. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and if you have any more questions, please put them in the comments below, and I hope you guys have a good one.